Well, welcome back for our last ComFish 22 forum for the day. We couldn't do this without the help of our sponsorship, Northern Bank and Highmark Marine Fabrication. So thank you to our sponsors. As it's probably obvious, those have been participating. We are doing hybrid forums in person and online, and we are working through the technical difficulties, but every presentation has been a new learning curve and we're navigating our way through pretty good. So welcome those of you online, and if you have questions, you can submit them in the Q&A portion on your screens. And then for those of you who are here, we have a microphone at the end of the presentation. There'll be an opportunity for some Q&A. So next we're going to hear a presentation about what do new commercial fishermen need to know with Gabe Dunham and Sunny Rice. Sunny Rice is the Alaska Sea Grant Marine Advisory Agent in Petersburg. She began working in the Alaska commercial fishing industry as a fish slimer in the early 1990s. After a few years as a port sampler with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, she began working in the Petersburg Marine Advisory Program office in 1998. In addition to co-founding the Alaska Young Fishermen Summits, her work has focused on the fishery business development, marine mammal and seabird interactions with fisheries, and general marine science education. Sunny's going to be joining us in Petersburg, and within the room we have Gabe with us here, and Gabe is the Alaska Sea Grant Marine Advisory Program Leader and Fisheries Specialist located in Juneau. Gabe was born and raised in Petersburg and commercially fishes in Bristol Bay, a region he formerly served as the Marine Advisory Program Agent there. His work for the program focuses on training and workforce development needs in the commercial fishing industry. So thank you for coming over to Kodiak, and I think we're starting with you, correct, Gabe?
That's right.
All righty.
Thank you, Teresa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Teresa. As Teresa mentioned, my name's Gabe. My colleague is on Zoom, and we'll probably hear from her later on when we go into our discussion part of this talk. We're going to chat for a little bit about the training needs for Alaska's beginning fishing business owners. And I'll tell you a little bit about this project before we get into the sort of the meat and potatoes of it, as it were. This is one of a number of nationwide projects that were funded, scoping projects that were funded by the National Sea Grant Program in anticipation of future funding from the Young Fishermen's Development Act that was put forward and passed through the late Congressman John Young's office, and through many of the efforts that were worked hard toward by some of our entities here in Alaska, AMCC, Alpha being just a few of them. So this project directed Sea Grant programs to come up with scoping efforts to identify the needs and some strategies to meet those needs to encourage the employment and the careers for young emerging or new commercial fishing business owners. So where we're at in this project, this is a two-part project, and we're in the first part. First, we're identifying the needs, and then we're going to be working on the strategies. And as far as the needs portion, we've done so far a number of listening sessions, the first of which were directed at some of our other training institutions and entities that are also addressing these needs that beginning commercial fishermen have in the state. And the second set of those listening sessions really was targeted towards the industry and kind of taking two lists of what's being done and then the needs and comparing them side to side and coming up with some conclusions. And these are some of the preliminary conclusions. This is an iterative process. We're currently still going through mostly one-on-one conversations with folks that we weren't able to access during our listening sessions. So next slide, please. So a little bit about our program before I get into the results here. So we're one of 34 Sea Grant programs. In Alaska, the University of Alaska Fairbanks is the Sea Grant institution. It's basically a federal and state partnership between NOAA and UAF. We've got a series of agents, a group of agents and specialists scattered around the state. Here in Kodiak, we have quite a few folks actually. We have an agent, Julie Matway, here. We've got a seafood marketing specialist. We've got our seafood scientists. We've got our aquaculture specialist here in Kodiak. And around the state, we have other examples here. Nome is one of our Sea Grant agents, also an agent in Petersburg, and soon to be back in Dillingham, and as well as an affiliate agent out in Alaska. So lots of folks on the ground around the state. Next slide, please. So before we get into sharing some of our share out and discussion here, to kind of plant a seed for discussion, if you wouldn't mind reading these two questions and kind of keeping these in the back of your brain as we go along here. If whether you're a fisherman or a person who works closely with the fishing industry, if you could ask yourself, what mistakes have you made yourselves or have seen people make, and what do you wish you knew if you had it to do all over again, or what do you wish others knew? So keep that in your mind, if you would, and we'll revisit that later on. So as I mentioned earlier, the design of this project was first to figure out what was being done. We'll take that information from institutions, what they're doing to train the industry, and then compare it back with what the industry says their needs are. Next slide. Whoops. Next slide again. So here's some examples of some of the institutions that are working in this area of commercial fishing workforce development. We've got our institution, of course. There are a lot of institutions in the university system, or location university systems across UAA, UAS, and UAF. For a couple examples here, up here, the Bristol Bay campus being one. Also AvTech, some local high schools, and this is not an exhaustive list, by the way. I know there are more high schools in the state working in this area. And then other entities such as the Small Business Development Association and the Alaska Small Business Development Center are also working with commercial fishing businesses. A little bit longer list of organizations here that we've spoken with and or worked with directly. Bristol Bay Economic Development Corporation, and similarly another CDQ, the Norton Sound Economic Development Corporation, do some work for their more localized fleet specifically. The Bristol Bay Native Association, a group that I've had an association rather that I've had the pleasure of working with personally on some crew training. The Homer Marine Trades Group and the Alaska Marine Safety Education Association we'll mention later on. Also, as I mentioned before, the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association and the Alaska Marine Conservation Council involved in training our next generation of fishermen as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're now going to break down these topics that training is taking place in here. We break these down into several areas, one of which is financial and management training, training in areas like taxes and record keeping, and managing and getting credit, things like risk management. And generally, the folks working on this are our organization, in addition to Alpha, AMCC, and the BBRSTA, among others. There's also a few specific classes that are more location-based. For example, BBDC does some training, particularly in taxes and record keeping, through some of their offerings on an annual basis. Next slide. So another area specifically targeting crew. A good example here is the crew class for drift gill netters that I worked with in BBNA, with BBNA in Bristol Bay. Some of the other folks working on crew training are Alpha through their crew apprenticeship program, BBDC and BBRCT. BBRCT is the Bristol Bay Regional Continuing Technical Education Program. It's a high school program and also leads training workshops and programs for middle school students. Also, the University of Alaska Workforce Development Program, specifically as it comes to, mostly crew awareness when it comes to crew training through career flyers and things of that nature. Also, the BBRSTA is involved in crew training, particularly excited to partner with them later on this year on a project in Dillingham. Next, please. Safety training. This includes for this list, we're thinking about things like the AMC's drill conductor class, which is probably pretty well known by a number of you. But they also offer some other safety trainings as well, or in ergonomics, marine safety, and first aid, just to name a few. They do the train the trainer courses also. The one thing I don't have up here is the Alaska Office of Boating Safety. That I don't believe is, hope I'm not speaking incorrectly on this, but I don't believe that's a Coast Guard accredited or a Coast Guard credential that's a result of their training. But they do offer some marine safety training. Next slide, please. So crew, or excuse me, beginning fishermen training in the area of regulatory processes and networking, things like in-person workshops, the Young Fisherman Networks and the Young Fisherman Almanac, and programs or trainings to help young fishermen understand fisheries management science. Some of the entities involved in this one: Alaska Sea Grant, AMCC, again, through their Young Fishermen's Network. Next, please. Marketing training. And when we talk about marketing, we're casting the net relatively wide, so no pun intended. Thinking about direct marketing as well. Alaska Sea Grant's involved in that. I know the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute also offers a number of resources for people that are into direct marketing their own catch. This also includes networking, which is something that we accomplished through a 5-session online class for direct marketers. And then, of course, there are also individual entities doing a lot of work through supporting people through organizing CSFs. Vessel maintenance and repair, and again, these aren't exhaustive lists, right? You'll find these topics in other places that aren't listed here. But a couple of examples of vessel maintenance and repair outboard classes. These are now sprinkled around the state. There's I think Kodiak College does an outboard class. The Kenai Peninsula College out of Homer, I believe it is, does an outboard class. A few of them, Ketchikan, I think, too. Vessel refrigeration classes, and I believe Kodiak still does this here, if I remember correctly. The Bristol Bay campus does that in partnership with a number of entities, including Alaska Sea Grant out in Bristol Bay. Basic vessel maintenance classes. This is even far more spread than the previous two subjects. This can encompass anything from DC electrical to hull maintenance and fabrication, things of that nature. Also hydraulics courses included in that list. Okay. So let's look at some of our preliminary results here. So the common things that we talked about over during our listening sessions are captured here. We can actually skip right over the slide and go to the next one, I think. This one's a little more informative. So these are the common topics that came up over and over in our listening sessions, with the ones bolded in green coloring being the most prevalent ones. That's crew training, crew awareness, financial management, and or business management, and networking. Those were by far the most that we had that our discussions surrounded. And that's not to say that there isn't anything being done in these areas, right? As the previous laundry list of things that young fishermen or beginning fishing businesses are receiving training in, these are included within that. But there's an important element, and that has to do with the accessibility of training. We'll get to that in a later slide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So to break these down a little bit more, we have some individual and specific pieces of feedback under each one of these. One of my favorites, probably under that first heading of crew training, is that good deckhands can be hard for new entrants to find. And in some cases, these are direct quotes from feedback we got from both from industry. There's a lot about crew training in here. As you can see, it's first on the list. It was also something that was brought up in the previous presentation. Crew training in a wider way to think of it in workforce development. Mentorship is mentioned here. It's an important part of how people get information about how to participate in industry and be productive. And some basic crew skills were suggested too. And it's quite a long list actually. But soft skills are mentioned. Kind of related to the last thing that's mentioned in that list, understanding the challenges of boat life, right? And how to get along with your crew members and how to conduct yourself professionally. Related to crew training, but different enough to mention it separately as crew awareness, and just encouraging or creating the level of awareness in communities, in Alaskan communities, that fishing is an opportunity that could be a productive career. So related to that, the crew just simply need to know about job opportunities. So financial management is another area. New entrants underestimate the costs and overestimate the revenue. And I chuckle because that doesn't seem to be something that's just limited to strictly new entrants. It's something that we all tend to think of things in a more rosy way than they may actually be. Also, the fishermen need to know about diversification options, both within and outside fishing. And then lastly, something that was really reflected on in our listening sessions is the need for networking, the continual ability, or sorry if that's a little kind of down towards the bottom, the continual availability of networking options. Next slide. Okay. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and that list of highlighted needs for beginning fishing business owners is not to say that those things aren't being done by anyone. It's that while they are being done, is that there could be more done in that area, or that it is simply not accessible by everyone who needs it, right? And that's one of the resounding things that we kept hearing, is that we hear about all these programs and we know they're around, but they're not always, we can't always get to them, right? And one of the interesting points that was made was had to do about halfway down with virtual delivery. And I think by this time, I'm sure all of us have joined more than one Zoom or other virtual meeting by this stage in the pandemic, hopefully at the end of the pandemic. But that's that virtual delivery works, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone equally, right? And that's an important consideration when we talk about trying to access and trying to get information out to folks, particularly across urban and rural coastal communities. And that was mentioned in that top bullet point right there. The rural community needs aren't always necessarily the same as the urban community needs, despite the differences across fisheries and gear types and locality and things like that. So one of the other things I'll point in here is that there's interest in integrating more heavily with schools, bring crew training into high schools. And I think there's been some success doing that here. I think Kodiak has a program or had a program that does that. And so does the BVRCT program that I mentioned earlier. And lastly, the need for coordination and partnerships among those providing training, leveraging resources, preventing overlap, things like that. So if we could come back, so those are preliminary results. That's the feedback. Some of the feedback we've heard from industry and from other folks that are either training directly or funding training or convening training opportunities. That about sums up our preliminary conclusions. That's for the needs portion. As I mentioned, this is a two-part project. It's not only consisting of identifying the needs, but also identifying some strategies. And so that'll be the next steps forward for this project will be to complete that, as I mentioned, iterative process, speaking to industry, speaking to entities that are doing training, and making sure we have a really accurate and quality perspective and view on what those needs are, and then bringing those groups back together and start talking about strategies and how we can work together, addressing some of those points that were, I think, on that last slide to leverage and avoid duplication and bring opportunities where they're needed. So with that, if I could please present these last discussion questions to anybody in the audience who has some input. The first one is, what additional information do you think a new entrant needs, whether it's from your own personal perspective or experience, or if it's something you've heard about or witnessed in the industry?
I had a question. It looks like in your scoping process, you really captured conversations from Southeast to the Bering Sea, and then kind of some of the summary points, were those kind of reflective of new entrant concerns and crew needs throughout the range? Did you see a lot of overlap in your discussions?
Yes, generally there was some overlap. That's why we have those topics that kind of floated to the surface across those listening sessions. A lot of emphasis on crew training specifically. So generally, yeah, I think there's a lot of commonality there. Another area is business and financial information and training, also a common area across a lot of those areas, or a lot of those regions rather.
Yeah, I was curious on.
Can you close the microphone, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the talk. I'm curious on specifically with younger fishermen or just getting into a fishery in terms of insurance, like for their vessels and whatnot. Have you found that we have found that it can be difficult to, have them get insurance at times? And I was curious if you ran across that yourself, or if you have any maybe tips or advice for young fishermen, particularly when it comes to insurance, for getting like a loan on their vessel.
Insurance is yeah, that's something that can be a challenge for sure from what we hear. There's and or experience directly. There's we do include that as part of our trainings, and there are some resources out there for first-time boat buyers that are trying to get insurance coverage. But yeah, risk management and insurance are topics. Yeah, and that kind of falls under that umbrella of financial and management, education and training. Yeah.
Gabe, let me interject. We had an insurance agent from here in Petersburg at the Young Fisherman Summit who reflected exactly what the questioner is mentioning, that challenges in finding insurance. I can't say that she had any great tips for us to pass along, though, although to looking at, the range, including pools. I mean, I know those can be challenging to get into, but also your private insurance people that are selling in the different communities. So,
well, I think I'm glad
it's an issue. I'll say, yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, thanks. You just reminded me of something that I think she mentioned, is that one of the important considerations of an underwriter is whether or not a person has experience operating a boat, which is kind of a chicken and an egg thing, right? For somebody getting into a fishery, I mean, it's tough to be able to write down a lot of experience running a boat before you buy a boat. It's so yeah, that was one of the things that person mentioned.
Yeah, hi, Sonny, this is Tab. I had a question about the fact that marine safety was not one of those that was highlighted by people, and what your thoughts of that participants didn't feel they needed, they already had that information, or?
No. So sorry if I wasn't clear on that. So that list of items were highlighted during our listening session. So they were highlighted as being important, but they weren't the most resounding item of importance within those listening sessions. So as they are important, but not of top importance within that list.
And why do you think marine safety wasn't of top importance for?
It's a good question. Marine safety training has been something that's been available through AMC for quite a while now. So I'm guessing part of the factor is that it's more available than some of the other areas of training on our list. That's my educated guess. Sonny, do you have anything to add to that?
just that we were trying to focus our discussions a little bit on gaps, like what's not already there. So I'd say kudos to AMC, but and obviously though we need training ongoing. I think that was another point from the delivery methods is like doing it one time doesn't mean that we have solved that need. It has to be done over and over and over again on a regular basis so that people can, and so I think AMC needs to expand probably too, but they're doing a pretty good job already. And so it didn't come up as like a gap, I think. Though it definitely came up with crew training. We want to be sure to include that as part of the crew training.
Thank you. Thanks, Gabe and Sunny. Yeah, we have some questions. Oh, let's
Looks
see.
like it was just Brian wondering about. the
Oh,
slide.
yeah, we were stuck. I had a question in regards to insurance needs for new entrants. Has there ever been any types of discussions for as a new entrance insurance pool? I've found some of the fishermen that are just starting to run their boat are just extremely conscientious and safety oriented. And I would think they do pretty well in that type of pool. So I just was curious if that type of discussion has come up before.
Yeah, Sunny, I'm going to defer to you. I haven't heard of that discussion before.
No, but just so folks know, as Gabe mentioned, we're still working on this assessment. So I'm taking notes and I'm going to add that on there because that's an interesting thought for sure for us to explore.
And then I'm just looking at the second question, how should we get that information to the fishermen? I think you guys do a really good job of that at Sea Grant, with your networking in the communities, throughout the state. And I think these type of things at commercial trade shows, I know there's the one that's been, growing out in Bristol Bay. I mean, Sitka has a fisherman's forum every year. Pacific Expo is really a great conglomeration of fishermen meetings. So I think those are definitely utilizing the established venues that people are familiar with attending and are kind of often in their communities where it's comfortable getting out are really good opportunities to help get the word out. So I think, reflecting on the past two presentations, just increased dialogue about everybody that's looking for both needs and solutions is a good step in the right direction.
Thanks for that suggestion. That I forgot to mention too that we plan on presenting the final results of this project at PME. So we'll be down there talking about this.
And could you maybe kind of share a little bit of the timeline for the assessment for the needs and when you anticipate moving into the second part of the project too?
Certainly, yeah. So we hope to wrap up the needs part of this discussion this summer or before many people turn into pumpkins for the summer and are off in the industry. So wrap up the needs part then, and then in the early months of fall, work on the strategies and have a good, if not complete, at least at the very least preliminary set of strategies and identified paths forward to talk with and discuss with the industry at PME.
Thank you. It looks like you have a comprehensive list of needs that have probably already said pretty well to just start charting out the next steps to doing some solutions. So, well, thank you. Any other questions from folks today or any that have come in online for us?
No, for just a quick way.
Jump on it.
Go on the microphone.
Hello, I'm with ASME, but I just recently joined ASME, and prior to that, I was with the Marine Exchange of Alaska. And I often fielded questions from people calling and asking where they can find jobs, crew members, people looking for jobs. I didn't never know exactly where to send them, and I saw one of your needs was finding good crew members. Is there a go-to online job posting site, or is it word of mouth?
Yes. I think there are a couple of online resources, though. I don't remember the names off the top of my head,
Okay.
unfortunately. But I see Facebook gaining more and more popularity in the
Okay.
cure specific pages that have started up.
Okay.
But,
Cool.
yeah.
Thanks.
And locations.
specific.
Yeah.
Mhm.
as well on Facebook for
Right.
Okay.
Bristol Bay, Japanese versus-
Okay, so Facebook's kind of the go-to lately.
Yeah, Facebook's got a lot.
Yeah, we do have a lot of direct marketer resources, so thank you for pointing that out.
This matchmaking, I mean, has come up though, because crew, like it said, skippers want good crew. And are they, we need to explore, I think, what would they be willing to do to make sure that the crew that they're getting is good? Do they want somebody to have a certificate? Do they want to have an internship, apprenticeship type program like Alpha runs out of Sitka? Should that be expanded more broadly around the state? And then also those crew, I mean, the thing about some of the open forums is that, are the crew getting on safe boats themselves? And is there a need there or a role for someone in the state to be providing a clearinghouse that if this random person from Kansas, wants a crew job, is there somewhere that they can go so they can make sure that they're getting on a safe boat, or at a minimum, giving them questions to ask to make sure that they're getting on a safe boat, whether or not somebody else wants to be the filter for that. But so, yeah, it's a broad question that it's obvious needs a lot of exploring as a part of this process.
I think it's come up more often than not in conversations about how to match up crew and boats, and kind of a halfway joking term, but kind of like the functionality of like a dating app, right? Where you can have a sure, yeah. Well, functionally, yes. Actually, maybe it's something a little bit different. Maybe you push a button and then they sync. I don't know, but but yeah, the need for that kind of utility and an easy application to do that is something that's been talked about.
I just kind of want to chime in and echo that need, because, not only do skippers need good crew, but crews need good skippers. And finding those matches has quite often just happened through word of mouth, local knowledge in communities. And that helps the person that lives in the community make those connections, or helps with a friend or a family member that's looking, get on a boat. No, that one, don't that one. Yeah, that one. But then how do you then kind of recruit that person from Kansas that's interested? Where can they go to learn a little bit about the dynamics of who's running that boat? And where can the skipper, learn a little bit more about the dynamics of who that person is? We hear a lot of people interest to go commercial fishing, and sometimes it gets glamorized. You get out there, it's like, yeah, you're living in a shoebox and one person moves, two others do too. It's not as fun as it's portrayed oftentimes. So I don't have the answer for that, but I think we could all kind of work together and try to build that platform with the technology that's out there to get out. Maybe you get a virtual experience, you plug in and go get thrown around on a boat for 24 hours. And then maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe that looks great. So I think this is a great subject. And I think it would really help identify, meet that identified need of a lack of dependable crew and crew throughout our communities. And so I just thought I'd rattle that on things.
And we're hearing this need from our colleagues up and down the West Coast too. I mean, I bet they're saying it on the East Coast. We don't meet with them on a regular basis like we do with the Sea Grant folks from up and down the West Coast, but yeah, they're talking about it also.
Well, gosh, well, thank you so much today.
Thanks.
Gabe and
Appreciate the
Sunny.
discussion.
All right.
Be
Thank
an
you.
ongoing conversation.